So one of my viewers, Turbo Jones, asked me to tell stories. Here's a story today about a fellow named Michael Cork. He was a music teacher in high school, New Lexington High School, south of Chicago. At age 40, he developed a problem sleeping. He thought it was due to his wife Penny's snoring. Penny actually went to the couch for 10 days to help Michael go back to sleep. It didn't help. Months went by and still no improvement. He developed a total inability to sleep. 8 weeks later, he started developing cognitive decline, difficulty walking. 6 months later, he was totally bedridden, still no sleep at all. He developed dementia, hallucinations, delusions. He was like a very serious Alzheimer's patient, but at early 40s. At age 42, he died. This was an unusual disease, but it has impact for all of us. I'll talk about that in just a minute. But first, an introduction. Brewer, Dr. Brewer with PrevMed, heart attack, stroke, cancer, disability, dementia prevention. So, this was an unusual disease. In fact, rare. It's called fatal familial insomnia. It's genetic and prion related. I may mention prions a little bit later just because I can't help it. But this is really not about biology and prions. It's about biology and sleep. The inability starts for these people at age 30 to 40. There's no known trigger. And if you look it up, you'll find a lot of faces there. People that have had fatal lack of sleep. And it's called fatal familial insomnia. Now, when you look at the brains of these folks, let's just talk about a brain for a minute. This is the cortex, this is the thalamus, this is the hypothalamus, and this is the pituitary gland. This is a blow up of the hypothalamus and pituitary gland. For those of you that don't remember, the pituitary gland is the master of the endocrine system. It sends hormones to the thyroid, the adrenals. It controls all of our endocrine responses. Right on top of that is the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It's the nucleus that senses light outdoors or sound, notices that things are getting dark and quiet, and puts us to sleep. This is the nucleus that controls sleep. Now, when you do a biopsy of someone who's died from familial insomnia, this whole area, including the thalamus, looks like Swiss cheese. There are just holes in it. It's incredibly damaged. A couple of other points about familial loss of sleep, familial insomnia. They discovered it a couple of hundred years ago. They found early on that it was what we call autosomal dominant. That means that a father could pass it 50-50 chance of each kid. So out of 4 kids, on average, 2 of them will have that gene. Now, speaking of the gene, they've actually mapped it. Let me show you that next. The gene is on chromosome number 20 and the P13 area. So, the patient 0 was a Venetian physician that had the mutation, and that he since passed that mutation on as a SNP, single nucleotide polymorphism. Again, big medical words in genetics. Don't worry about them if you're not familiar with them. Basically, he developed the mutation and has passed it on. He died in 1765. And again, Anybody want to wonder why that's not a very common disease? I mean, it's fatal very young. But it's fatal old enough to have passed through having kids. So that's why it's being passed on. Now, when you look at the somnogram, what's a somnogram? It's looking at the brain waves of people that sleep. When you look at the somnogram of people with familial insomnia, you see that they lose the ability to develop deep sleep waves. In REM sleep, rapid eye movement, you remember that. Now let's go back and acknowledge sleep is very important for every one of us. Most of us don't have to worry about ever being touched by familial insomnia, but all of us need to worry about that. Lack of sleep is one of the most common causes of trauma. In fact, it's so common that there's a well-known phrase, asleep at the switch. That actually came from railroads, where the lineman was asleep at the switch, or the engineer on the train was asleep at the switch, and resulted in deaths of not only the patient but many others. Sleep problems in association with death have hit the news again over the past few years. I'm not going to go into the details on that, but again, got a patient who has significant problems associated with sleep leading to death. Now, if you Google familial insomnia, you'll see a lot of pictures, a lot of faces, people that have had this problem. It's very interesting to note that you'll see a couple of faces on here, famous people. Thomas Edison and Margaret Thatcher. Did they have familial insomnia? No, they did not. The reason their picture is up here is that both of them were quoted as having said that sleep is a waste of time. Obviously didn't know anything about familial insomnia, maybe never really ever thought that much about the death toll on highways. So again, sleep is important. It's not just important in terms of trauma. Sleep is known, it's been associated with the onset of type 2 diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, death, and again, obviously, death in young people with trauma. So, again, what I would suggest, why don't you get the book, Why We Sleep, and read a little bit of it. I think it's Matthew Walker. Thank you for your interest.